Okay, hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Improve Your Reporting with Sage Alerts and Workflow. We appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. Jeremy, if you could go to the next slide for me, please. There are a couple of housekeeping items we'd like to mention before we begin. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please either raise your hand and we can unmute your line so you can ask it directly, or you can type your question and submit it through the GoToWebinar question box. And I'll certainly filter those to our presenter today, Jeremy. And we'll be answering questions throughout and also following up at the end for any that you think of afterwards. I'd like to introduce today's speaker. We have Jeremy Fox, who is an associate consultant here at Socius. Jeremy's background is in computer networking engineering technology and focuses on customizations for our Sage software practice, including Sage Alerts and Workflow. So at this point, Jeremy, I believe we're ready to transition over to you to cover the agenda for today.
All right, thank you for that, Julie. So today we're looking at what is Sage Alerts and Workflow, also known as Knowledge Sync. How does Alerts and Workflow function? And why do you actually need Alerts and Workflow? So we'll start with what is Sage Alerts and Workflow. Essentially, it is a corporate smoke detector. It monitors your system for any and all conditions you're looking for. Can monitor multiple different databases at the same time. This means it can monitor your CRM, your ticket software, your ERP software, and any other database you're looking at. Now, how does this work? It works in a UI-driven query. So you do not need to understand SQL to set up an alert. You simply need to know the database structure for your software. So for Sage 100, it is fairly complicated. However, we can help you with this setup. Now, why do you want this? Well, simply put, it lets you make informed decisions on how your company is structured. It also helps you check, did you forget something? I know I do all the time. Have you ever asked the question to yourself, if only I knew, I could have stopped that. I could have paid that invoice on time. I could have made that collection, all around helping you spend your time more effectively, generating more revenue. Now, does that always help you? No. Yes, it'll help minimize human error in your software. So, now how does this actually look? Essentially, I went through this already on accident. You monitor your database. It lets you then take action on that database and then react. Essentially, it checks for if an invoice is due. It then alerts you that that invoice was due, and then you can pay that invoice to avoid any fees, or on the flip side, make that collection. So at this point, I would like to go look at how this actually works in the real world. Here you can see the lifeblood of Alerts and Workflow. This is the building blocks of how the system is set up and runs. It's very light on system requirements, meaning that it can almost always sit on the same exact hardware as your ERP software. This is the collections query that I mentioned. It runs similar to SQL. meaning you need to select the tables that you would like, how they're linked, the columns that you would like to see, and any filtering criteria. Here is a moment where you can see how does that actually run. And you can see a simple snapshot of the data. So, what does that actually mean to you? At this point, I'm going to run a query, and you can see that the inbox for our email for the demo software is currently empty. So I'm going to schedule the event now, which normally would be automatic, but for demo purposes, we need to make it manual. And this is one example of how you could see a collections call list for your internal company. This could be automatic and normally would be quite a bit smaller, but for demo purposes and for our next step, I wanted to make sure that it would hit every individual who was registered yesterday. So I'm going to leave that there and go back to our alerts and workflow. At this point, for those of you who were registered yesterday, I've gone ahead and scheduled you as a customer that you would potentially be sending out this collection alert to. This would show you how it could work for your company. So again, I'm going to schedule this email, and you should shortly receive an email in your inbox just as I'm about to receive one in mine. So the attachment shows that this invoice to Maverick, who ordered a couple different widgets, is past due. Albeit that's simple and can be highly customized by HTML emailing, as well as any different PDF, Crystal reports, Excel, or any other file type that you want to attach. We also can schedule a purchase order, so where if somebody on the ordering line makes a change to a purchase order that may or may not affect manufacturing, we would obviously like to know, but that information doesn't always get relayed to manufacturing. With Custom Office and Sage, we can make that come through to our manufacturing line. So I'm going to enter an invoice and show you how simple and easy that can work in your system today without other customization. So you see the original required date has been posted. The quantity has also had a quantity original and posted. But if I make a change to the original order or the required date, this will be reflected in Alerts and Workflow to let you know that there has been that change. So at this point, I'm going to, again, run the alert. And we will see this reflected. And in this case, it gives us this list of all the invoice and line items with the original and new required dates and quantities, so that your manufacturing team will know that there was a change. And going back to the human error portion, as long as that check mark is still out there, you must clear that check mark for that alert to no longer be triggered. This makes sure that your manufacturing team acknowledges that change was made, thus increasing their productivity because no one needed to go out there and manually tell them that happened or send them an email directly. Now, you might ask the question, how simple can you get and still be effective? You can be as simple as sending an automatic Crystal report every week to you, similar to how this alert for telling you which items you need to order for that week. It's as simple as, look at my inventory, how much do I have on hand, how much do I need to order? Albeit simple, but incredibly important. This makes sure you, again, know without having to go look inside of Sage for every single item for what you need to order. Is there any questions on that or anything of that nature?
Let me take a look, Jeremy. It doesn't look like it right now. I'll remind everyone that you can either raise your hand or type your question into the GoToWebinar question box if you do have any questions. I think we're good to continue, Jeremy.
All right. Those were some of the straightforward alerts that I think would manually hit our large customer base. So that is the simple overview of alerts and workflow.
Jeremy, I know that we have a lot of Sage clients that currently use alerts and workflow. Can you give one or two real world examples of how you're working with clients? You don't need to mention client names, but kind of the projects you're working on with them and in an everyday scenario where this might come in useful.
Well, depending on the situation, and I'll go back to most of these alerts because obviously these were whitewashed, but most situations do call for inventory or tracking your salesperson. For example, we needed to make sure if a manufactured item, a line item was changed on the purchase date. Well, that goes back to the custom office, but the same filter looked for changes, but only for items that have a work ticket assigned to them, meaning if only one of these items affect a manufacturing line, only that item will be sent to the floor so that they can act accordingly. So is that a close representation of what you're looking for, or?
Yes, I think so.
All right. Now, obviously, collections and call sheets are clearly useful. for a number of different instances. And those have been applied, and it's actually been the most sought out question we have. And that's why we've made this Crystal report, and I wanted to show that so that you don't have to keep going inside of Sage and reprinting when somebody has a question. So that's kind of a nice feature. But I really don't know how to expand upon such a clear example of how to make that work for you.
Okay. Jeremy, we have another question here. Can alerts go to multiple people?
Yes, and that was, I was trying to display this to as many of our attendees as possible. Alerts can hit entire groups of people segregated by if one email address by the line item. So going back to the collections alert, it sends the email by looking at the line item to see which email address is tied to which customer. So when it looks at that row, it knows send this specific invoice to this specific email address. So when I broadcast this alert, it hit all of the different invoices I've manually keyed in as customers without sending each one a notification that each one was copied. So that's why we only saw the one friendly reminder when a number of different copies were sent out, all customized, where this is a variable field as well as the date and the invoice number. These are all pulled from the line record or the invoice associated.
It looks like Alan has Alan, I'm going to unmute your line now so you can go ahead and speak.
Yeah, hi, this is Alan Niergarth, and Jeremy, thanks for this insight on how alerts works. I know you're asking about an example of maybe some other real-world uses. We've got a client that has weekly sales reports they want issued. So these are Crystal reports that were created. Management gets a variation of the report that shows the sales, gross profit, and cost. So there's a master copy that would go to management, and then each of the individual salespeople get their territory sales, and what they see is basically just the total sales with a comparison of year-to-date and last year for the same time period for those customers. So they can easily see on a weekly basis if they've got customers that bought a lot of product the prior year and all of a sudden they've fallen off a little bit, maybe that client needs a little bit more attention. Or maybe they've increased and they want to take them to lunch. So that's just another example of where Sage Alerts really fill the need for the sales management team. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan. That is helpful.
In addition, and to Alan's point, that those alerts are scheduled, meaning there is no more interaction from any persons directly to fire those alerts off. They just are updated and sent and delivered to all of those people individually. So it's a very set it and forget it type of program.
Jeremy, we have another question that came in. Can you create an alert that triggers off an expiration date, maybe tie it to a receipt date?
Yes, you can create alerts off of any data within Sage, for example, or any other database. So if you know what you want an alert for, we can build a custom alert specifically for you or assist you in setting that up. So as long as that data is in Sage, or any database for that matter, you can have an alert triggered off of that. That can be a change of that same information, or that can just be if that exists or within a certain date range.
Hey, Jeremy, as questions continue to come in, will you pop back open that PowerPoint presentation? There are a couple other things we wanted to cover as we have people submitting here. Wanted to remind everyone that all upcoming events and current promotions can be found on our site at socius1.com. In conjunction with today's webinar, we are offering a 10% off Sage Alerts and Workflow through the end of February. So please contact Jeremy or your account manager, Lori or Diane, if you're interested in taking advantage. Also, Sage has announced their first quarter promotions. They expire at the end of March. So please check those out at our website, socius1.com/sage-promotions. And lastly, save the date. Sage Summit 2016 is going to be July 25th through 28th in Chicago this year. And Jeremy, if you go to the next slide, I want to make sure everybody has your contact information in case anyone thinks of any questions after today's presentation. You can certainly reach out to Jeremy or your account manager directly. And his information, his phone number and email address is there on the screen.